Good evening. I'm Father Alexander. This is St. Peter's in Hove, and it's time for our 125th step in our walking tour through the Bible and our second step in our adventure, so to speak, through the book of Tobit. Now, you remember we left Tobit at in the depths of misfortune. He's lost all his money, he's gone blind. And now, sudden shift to 200 miles away, where we meet the girl Sarah, and she is in a very similar situation to Tobit. The trouble with Sarah is she's young, she's beautiful, we suppose, and she's an only daughter, and she's going to be married. In fact, she's been attempted to be married 7 times. Every time her husband goes into the bridal chamber, the husband is killed by the devil Asmodeus. And Sarah then suffers the torture and humiliation of being rebuked by her own servant girl, just as Tobit was rebuked by his own wife, who says, "Yes, you kill your bridegrooms yourself. That makes 7 already to whom you've been given, and you've not once been in luck yet. Just because your bridegrooms have died, there is no reason for punishing us. Go and join them. May we be spared the sight of any child of yours." What a horrible person this maidservant is, saying it's all your fault these 7 young men have died, and let's hope you never have a child. We couldn't bear to see it. It'll be so ugly or whatever. And why don't you go and die as well, because we're sick to death of you. Whereupon the poor girl takes this to heart. She goes upstairs and she considers hanging herself. But luckily she doesn't hang herself because she thinks of her father and how upset he'd be, and instead she makes a prayer. Just as Tobit had made a prayer full of desperation, saying he'd come to the low point, he only wants to die, so too she says that she can't bear life anymore. Now, therefore, we've got 2 people, both of whom are in the depths of despair. What happens at the end, just at the end of the 3rd chapter? The prayer of each of them found favor before the glory of God, and Raphael was sent to bring remedy to them both. So the archangel Raphael is sent by God to solve the problems of both of them, to raise them up out of their misery. He was to take the white spots from the eyes of Tobit, so that he might see God's light with his own eyes, and he was to give Sarah, the daughter of Raguel, as a bride to Tobias, the son of Tobit. So he's going to solve Tobit's problem. He's also going to solve Sarah's problem, and he's going to unite the 2 families, who are vaguely connected anyway, because Tobit's son Tobias is going to be married to Sarah. And he's also, just for good measure, going to get rid of the devil that has been wrecking the matrimonial chances of Sarah. So we're told what the solution is, we're told what the problem is, and we're told what the solution is. The solution is the intervention of an angel of God. Except, as we'll see, the angel of God comes down disguised as a human being. Now, and it says the author has got some artistry, because he says this. Tobit was coming back from the courtyard into the house at the same moment as Sarah, the daughter of Raguel, was coming down from the upper room. It's in the courtyard that Tobit has his moments of despair. It's in the upper room that Sarah has her moments of despair. They're both leaving these moments of despair at the same time. There's unity of time. The 2 are completely separate geographically, but at the very same time, they're both, the prayers go up and the prayers are answered. Then in the 4th chapter, we have a sort of a bit of an interlude where Tobit suddenly remembers he's got a fortune. This is a fairy tale, don't forget. He's got a fortune with his friend Gabael at Raggie's in Media. Nice to know, because don't forget, his wife has been taking in washing. It's funny that he should only remember it now. And he says he's going to send his son Tobias off on a journey to go and pick up this money. And it's easy to sort of pick up the money because they've done this sort of letter which they've divided. And when you put the letters together, you'll know that the money is his. Okay. Now, and then he gives his son a whole load of advice, a bit like Polonius in Hamlet gives a whole load of advice to his son Laertes when he's going off to Paris. And this advice is essentially a bit of an interlude in the story because it holds the story up. But this advice is how to be the perfect Israelite. So he says, be faithful to the Lord all your days. That's a nice thing, isn't it? And he also says, he tells him, he's his son. The first thing he says, when I die, give me an honorable burial. When your mother dies, give her an honourable burial next to me. So number one duty of a son is to provide a funeral, a proper funeral to the parents. Worth bearing in mind that. Obviously, the author has got a bit of a thing about the importance of Jewish funerals. And then be faithful to the Lord all your days. Again, it's paragraph by paragraph. The opening sentence of each paragraph in chapter 4 gives you the flavour. Set aside part of your goods for almsgiving. Good advice. My child, avoid all loose conduct. Choose a wife from your father's stock. Now, this boy, he's called the boy, Tobias, is 18 years old, we assume, because he's marriageable age, but he's still very young. Do not keep back until the next day the wages of those who work for you. Social justice. Give your bread to those who are hungry. Charity. And finally, this wonderful bit. Ask advice of every wise person. Never scorn any profitable advice. Bless the Lord in everything. Beg him to guide your ways and bring your paths and purposes to their end. For wisdom is not the property of every nation. Their desire for what is good is conferred by the Lord. And at his will he lifts up or he casts down to the depths of the dwelling of the dead. So now, my child, remember these precepts and never let them fade from your heart. And then he says he sends him off on this little mission. But it's a beautiful passage, that. And it's a lovely passage because it sums up the Israelite way of life, which is also the Christian way of life. But it's this bit I particularly like. My child, avoid all loose conduct. And then he says, of course, don't despise your fellow Jews, but avoid all loose conduct. Now, this idea of chastity has not actually featured much in the Bible so far. Now, as you know, the Bible is historically out of order. We're not even halfway through the Old Testament, and this is a very late book. Obviously, the stories about King David are much earlier. King David isn't really castigated for his lack of chastity. He's castigated for his injustice towards Uriah the Hittite. King Solomon is not actually castigated for his lack of chastity. He's castigated for going after strange gods and not keeping his wives in their place. Not, in other words, allowing his wives to leave him by the nose with their foreign gods. It's never said, oh, King Solomon, did you really need 2,000 wives, or how many it was? Oh, King David, did you really need to have all those concubines? On the contrary, their concubines and so on, that's not criticized. And even going further back into the book of Genesis, nobody is told off for their lack of chastity. Of course, we do have the law of Moses about women being put to death for adultery. That doesn't actually say you're put to death for unchastity, you're put to death for adultery. We also have various laws to do with uncleanness. But this idea, avoid all loose conduct, does seem to be the first very clear teaching in the Bible about chastity. I don't say historically the first. It's a very late book, but the first in our linear reading of the Bible. Now, what happens then is Tobias is going off, but he's only a boy, so he needs a guide, and miraculously, this guide turns up, who just happens to be the Archangel Raphael. And he is disguised as somebody who calls himself Azarias. But he takes the boy by the hand, and he will take the boy to Ecbatana, where he'll meet Sarah. Now, meanwhile, they have a bit of an adventure with a fish. Might just be a crocodile who jumps out of the river and tries to eat Tobias, but Tobias kills the fish and keeps the gall and the spleen and the liver of the fish, which is going to frighten away the devil. I did say, didn't I, that this was a fairy story. But what's really important, so that happens with the fish. What's really important is that after they've killed off the fish, Raphael, who incidentally is the person you pray to if you want a spouse, Raphael explains to the boy that he is to marry Sarah, who is his next of kin, this nearest in kin of a marriageable bride. She is his by right because he is her near relative. Now, this, of course, is again another thing that the author has in mind, that it's really good that not only you should marry your fellow Israelite, but you must marry somebody from your actual tribe, your actual clan, your actual family. So let's say she's his fifth cousin or something like that. It's not incestuous per se. Now, he says she's a thoughtful, courageous, and very lovely girl. Hey, he's selling it. And her father loves her dearly. You have the right to marry her. Listen, brother, this very evening I shall speak about the girl and her father and arrange for her to be betrothed to you. When we come back from Raggles, we can celebrate the marriage. Oh, well, we'll do it this very evening. And incidentally, you may claim her father's inheritance. She's not just lovely, she's rich. Now that's great. There's a massive dowry waiting for you. But Tobias replied to the angel, I've been told that she's already been given in marriage 7 times, that each time her bridegroom has died in the bridal room. A snag. I don't want. And he actually says, I am this makes me afraid. You're saying I should marry this girl, but I'm going to be killed by the devil Asmodeus, like all the other 7 who went in. In other words, getting married. Now, why does the devil kill these 7 people? Well, devils do these things, don't they? Devils are nasty pieces of work. But the symbolism of attempting to marry Sarah will lead to your death is powerful. I don't say it's not an emblem of anything, it's a symbol. It's a symbol of the unease that may surround sexual relations and marriage. The angel said, have you forgotten your father's advice? After all, he urged you to choose a wife from your father's family. Listen then, brother, do not worry about the demon. Take her. This very evening, the heart and liver of the fish will be burnt on the incense, and that will solve the problem. So we have this fish liver oil, which will kill off the devil, get rid of the devil. Do not be afraid, says the angel. She was destined for you from the beginning, and you are the one to save her. She will follow you, and I pledge my word, she will give you children who will be like brothers to you. Do not worry. I think it's beautiful words. And this, I think, it becomes extraordinary at this point. And this is, I think, this story is the foundation of magical realism, as we call it. And when Tobias heard Raphael say this, when he understood that Sarah was his sister, i.e., his relative, a kinswoman of his father's family, he fell so deeply in love with her that he could no longer call his heart his own. Extraordinary. He's in love with her. So obviously she was rather problematic because, the 7 previous spouses had all been killed. But Raphael assures him everything will be fine, assures him why everything's going to be fine, because this magic, if you like, this miraculous properties of the fish. And this word, which comes from Raphael, who comes from God, reassures him. The blessing of God makes the marriage wholesome. And he falls so totally in love with her. He's never met her, but he falls so totally in love with her that he could no longer call his heart his own. So now we have teaching about chastity, avoid all loose conduct. Now we have teaching about romance, about love between spouses. And once again, it's a first in the Bible. I've spoken long enough, but I'll talk about this again later. Okay, all the best now. Bye.